Hey there, this is Lenny, the Litmos mascot, and I'm here to welcome you to Litmos. We develop e-learning solutions for the world's best performing companies. The Solution Suite is a powerful but easy to use LMS and a comprehensive course library. Together, they give you everything you need to power your online learning programs. And you'll be in good company. Thousands of organizations trust Litmos solutions to centralize and deliver transformative training to employees, customers, and partners. These organizations understand that learning is the central connection between people and performance. It's critical to driving engagement and commitment across the entire business. But what set Litmos solutions apart? Simply put, a super intuitive interface and an innovative feature set loved by admins and learners alike. Add to that instant access to an ever-growing library of e-learning courses, and you'll see why Litmos stands out from the pack. See for yourself with a demo or a free trial.
Hello, and welcome to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, Digital Transformation and Learning, sponsored by Actio Learning, Administrate, Edstudia, Litmos, and WhatFix. I'm Dee Caraglino, event producer and your host for the day. Before we dive into our next session, I'd like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speakers and get the most out of today's sessions. Throughout today's event, please feel free to chat comments into the chat window and submit questions in your Q&A window. I'll be monitoring your comments and saving your questions for Q&A toward the end of the session. I've enabled closed captions for this event. You may select to turn on or off the subtitles by locating the closed caption icon in your toolbar. I encourage you to share the information you received today via social media by following our handle at Training Industry. That's Training Industry without the Y. We will be engaging in the Twitter conversation throughout the event, so please feel free to join in there. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to complete a short feedback survey, and we'd appreciate your thoughts on today's event. Lastly, all of our sessions are being recorded and will be archived on trainingindustry.com, and you'll receive a link to the on-demand sessions in the follow-up email. If this is your first Training Industry event, we'd like to welcome you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D through live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, and our podcast. Make Training Industry your go-to resource for learning solutions. Visit trainingindustry.com to learn more. Now, without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Samantha Lang and Adele Pfister. Samantha is a marketing content director at Litmos. She has contributed to B2B software marketing teams for over 20 years, specializing in messaging, content creation, branding, and creative strategy. She entered the e-learning industry in 2015 when she joined Litmos and continues to grow her interest and knowledge in the space. Adele Pfister has 12 plus years experience in the instructional design world, specifically focusing on learning strategy, learning management system operations, and e-learning design. Her latest passion is flexing her design skills to become a champion of making memorable training experiences by delivering meaningful learning products. She loves taking a consulting approach with projects and hopes all learners go home feeling valued and supported in their role. Welcome, Samantha and Adele, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dee. And I think Adele's going to pull our presentation up. And first of all, thanks to Training Industry for hosting us today. We always appreciate that. And welcome everybody to how digital learning can determine your company's future right now. So we have a lot to cover, and we're going to try to get it done in about 40 minutes so that we can take your questions. So we'll, Adele, do we want to move to the agenda?
Let's do this.
Okay.
Here we go.
So, yeah. So we're not going to get too in the weeds here, but we're going to talk as all of you know, the umbrella topic for these talks today are on digital transformation. So we're going to do a little bit of education on where does that term come from? What is it? Why do we always use it now? We're going to talk about where e-learning kind of fell into the mix in that larger digital transformation. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's needed today as far as what are the key essentials to keep up with this digital transformation as it pertains to training. And then the really exciting part of our talk today is Adele's going to talk about some of her experience with a manufacturing company that went through a digital transformation. So she's going to go into some depth on that. And then we're going to talk about what we've learned, and then we'll hopefully get to hear from you and get to interact a little bit and do some Q&A. So I think that's it.
I hope my PowerPoint wants to be picky.
Okay, so, you know, no, I don't think any business person probably today is not familiar with the term digital transformation. We all say it, we all really know what it is. But surprisingly, I think the term was actually introduced in 2010 or the early 2010s from a guy named Peter Drucker, and well, actually in 1999, and he launched this idea of transformative training. So when you think about digital transformation and training, that's where he coined this term of that training can be transformational. And then when you think about what's happening in the technology space, as far as we're all transforming, you know, obviously in our day-to-day lives, like everything we do is all digital transformation. And where does training fit into that? So I think, and again, as Adele's going to speak later on this, is that training is transformative now more than ever because things are changing so fast. And so even if your skill set, there's some stats out there that like everybody's skill set's going to change in 3 years. You know, you look at Chat GPT and these things that are happening. And so we're all transforming really, really rapidly. And there's no way for those of us in the business world to keep up unless you're continually learning. So that's kind of where I think it fits in. And we can go to the next slide, I think, Adele. So this transformation has been going on in the training world, as you all know, on the call today, you all know. So 98% of large companies have an LMS. 96% of mid-sized companies have an LMS. So training people have been in the digital world for quite some time, and it's obviously the vast majority of companies are very much in the online learning world. The pandemic obviously contributed to that because companies that were doing a lot of live training had to make a switch, even if you weren't already, which many were already, but if you weren't, you had to, because we weren't doing live stuff. So the question on this next slide is, okay, so if 98% of large and 96% of midsize all are already using an LMS, then why do 48% of companies want a different one?
Right.
And our friends over at Brandon Hall, this is from their research. So almost half of the entire massive population of LMS users are not happy with the technology. And we're talking about digital transformation. So what's missing? What they're using a system. Why don't they like it? I mean, I don't know if you want to add to that.
I have a few thoughts. I think I have a few ideas, and we'll go into that during my use case. I'm really excited to share that with you because it'll kind of highlight some of the major whys behind why people aren't happy. A lot of it has to do with doing your homework and then simply, you know, partnering with your stakeholders so that you can have that flexibility and that time to do your homework up front, and also pairing and aligning with the right tools and really doing your homework. You found your needs, you found your gaps and your problems. Now, how do you tie truly the right technology with what your needs are? And I think sometimes we might pull the trigger a little too soon, or we might have an idea and it's a really great idea, but is it really best suited for our needs? And I think that's what I want to drive home today with the story time that we have later.
Yeah. So, and I think probably just guessing, and I please chat in and send your comments. But I think, you know, a lot of the struggles, it's not, as you're saying, Adele, it's not necessarily that you don't have the technology. I mean, the technology exists.
Yes.
But how are you using it, and are you using it effectively as applied to your unique business, your unique learners, your different audiences? I mean, it can be internal, external, whatever.
Right.
But are you using the technology in a way that you're really maximizing your own digital transformation?
That's right.
So I'm not going to get too deep on this one, but I mean, as we already discussed, LMSs are pretty ubiquitous. Almost everyone is using them. So that's not a differentiator. If you're on the admin side, you're not going to differentiate yourself from your competitors because, oh, well, we have an LMS. Well, okay, well, we have an LMS too. So how are you really going to say we're training our people better than the competitor?
Yeah.
Because it's more than just this old school, like, we're going to push training out to you because we have the tool to do it. Well, that's not really the direction that we're going now, because as we all know in our personal and business lives, things are targeted, things are personalized. It can't just be this one to many mass push, so what I think, and again, please chat in, and I think what the challenge is now from the admin side is you really do want to personalize. How do you do that? How do you know what your learners want? And how can it be? I always use the Spotify example because I'm a big Spotify fan. Those songs are served up to me based on what I like. And now the learning world is going that direction. So my courses should be served up to me. And it's hard to do, but I mean, that's what we want, right? From an admin side. And then the learners, it's exactly, we want this, B2C feeling, this B2C business to consumer feeling that our needs are being met. Again, Spotify, that the songs that are being presented to me are stuff that I'm probably going to like. And that's what learners want, because it's like, well, I want to develop my career. I want to do my, leadership training, what have you. I want to do my sales mastery training. I want to do my, whatever it is in your particular field. But the learner feels like it needs to be useful to me. And I know it's hard to do, but that's what we're going to talk about.
We're getting there though. And that's one of the things, in my bio that D-Rad is, I really do. And I think a lot of trainers and learning and development specialists will also agree, is you take a consultative approach, right? You're a consultant of sorts, even if you're internal. And that's why we're starting to see more learning and development partners, because that's really what we do. We partner with different parts of the org and external parts of the org too, depending on the structure. And you really do sit as a consultant and treat them as customers and then release a product.
That is so cool. Yeah. So we'll probably talk about this a little bit if we have time, but we call these the little balloons here that our mascot is holding, create, curate, connect. We would say that the future of learning, these are the essentials that we talked about in the agenda. The essentials is that ideally you will have one system as your core learning system. Now, that does not mean that it's not integrated with, of course, it's integrated with CRM, or it's integrated with, your web conferencing, whatever. But at the core, at the heart, you want to be able to create your own content within that system. You don't even need a third party. Curate, meaning buy off the shelf content. Why create? For example, compliance is probably the easiest example there, which is, you're really going to go build your own compliance courses? No, go buy it.
Very rare. It's very rare. Sometimes the finance company orgs need it, but it is very rare.
Yeah. And then the connect part is the LMS itself, which is you're connecting the learners. And then also, speaking of integrations, you're connecting to different systems as needed. Again, or according to your unique business, different systems that if you're, a sales driven organization, you're going to want to connect to your CRM if you're, all that stuff. So I think I'll hand it over to you, Adele, on this. Let's talk about how you've in your experience, you've actually dealt with this, and you have been through digital transformation. You've done
multiple times.
You've done it. Yeah. So explain it to us.
Multiple times, multiple industries. So the financial industry, online retail, the one we'll use today. So I've always been an instructional designer by trade. My passion is definitely learning. And my main end game is typically, how do I make people's lives easier in their day-to-day? Because, we often want to build training for lots of things, but we really need to hone in on how are we supporting our staff in their day-to-day? How are we making their lives easier? Because that's what's impactful. That's what starts hitting productivity numbers and efficiency and effectiveness. And so, and the nice thing is, it typically goes in hand in hand with helping people have a better day-to-day. Because if you go home from work feeling a little bit better about yourself, the rest of your day gets a little bit easier, right? So that's one of my biggest passions.
And now I think, because we all are undergoing these personal digital transformations, a lot of people want, it's more of a sense of purpose, and not to be super lofty, but like a sense of purpose of like, if I'm going to spend my precious time doing something, then have it be useful to me in some kind of outcome. So whether that means career development, whether that means some kind of soft skill that you're developing, I want to be a better communicator. I need to have better, mindfulness or what have you. But I think everybody is so spread very thin, because we are in a digital world and because we have so many applications in front of us all the time, that we want to feel that the way that we are focusing our energy, and whether it's, is that I'm getting, there's something valuable in it to me.
Yes, and meaningful. And so the real world, that's always hard for me to say, real world use case today. I've done online retailing, finance industry, big finance industry too, and then global manufacturing. So today I'm going to tell you a little story about global manufacturing. I was hired on as the LMS admin and instructional designer, so I was in charge of all e-learning delivery, and it was actually a wonderful experience. It was super challenging. We learned a ton. It was, and I know a lot of you can relate to this, we were a team of 3 for about 5,000 employees. And so our resources were quite limited, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't make impact. And so it was my boss and then my good colleague, and he was in charge of being at the plant. So he did a lot of traveling because we were global. We were literally global. We had multiple countries, multiple plant locations. And so this also meant we were multilingual. And so we faced a lot of, not bad, but we faced a lot of obstacles. And then, what was their need here as this global manufacturing company? Well, as you can imagine, they had a vast range of education levels. Again, not bad, just the reality of our situation. And there was a big difference between corporate level employees and then entry level who came into the plants to help us produce things. And so their main training needs were, the typical ones, audits, if you're doing ISO, you got to be ISO certified. So audits are heavy duty. OSHA, upskilling was a huge one. And back to what you were saying earlier, Samantha, we ran a lot of surveys because we needed to bring in the data once, and I'll touch more on this in a minute. We needed to bring in quite a bit of data to prove our case. And so we did run and conduct a lot of surveys. And one of the biggest things we found was completely in alignment with global research, which said employees wanted to feel valued by being offered abilities to upskill. So upskilling was a big one. No matter where you landed in the org, upskilling was huge, want and desire. New hire onboarding, of course. Cross training was really huge. We had a need, we couldn't keep people on one assembly line their entire life cycle of their career, right? We needed, for functionality and efficiencies, to be able to cross train these individuals so that they could run different lines in different production times and states. And then compliance, of course, is the big one as well for 5,000 people. And now all that sounds pretty typical. All that sounds pretty normal. So we did, when I came in, we did have an LMS. We had an HRIS in place. So we had these digital tools in place The only thing was when my boss and I, we both kind of came into the org. I came in, and right when I came in, my boss got promoted and moved up in the ranks. And so we inherited a specific situation, and it wasn't necessarily bad. It was just what it was. And we looked at it, we took a deep dive into it, and we quickly realized, just based off of what managers were telling us, what leadership was telling us, what entry-level employees were telling us, because we did go that far down. We wanted to hear from the horse's mouth what they were experiencing. We did find that maybe we would have made some different decisions had we been in that driver's seat earlier on, but we were where we were, and we needed to handle that, and we needed to deal with it as best we could. And in a way, the silver lining was we learned a ton. You know, together as a team of 3, we learned so much so rapidly. And so,
and Adele, if I may, so you inherited this whole infrastructure, were you empowered to change it, or you just had to just accept?
We actually got very lucky. We had a very solid relationship with our VP of HR, and we had, at the time, we had a solid relationship with operations, so the manufacturing. We had, you know, my boss had really done an amazing job building relationships. So here's that plug for, don't ever doubt yourself in building relationships as an instructional designer, as a trainer, as an L&D leader. Relationship building is so key, and that's part of what made us successful. You know, they had just gone through a digital transformation, and that was the painful part. Is my boss and I stood back and we started hearing feedback, and we're like, oh no, the transformation wasn't necessarily successful. And so we had to come in and kind of triage it, so to speak. And while we were triaging it, we also came up with other solutions that we could implement along the way as quickly and as rapidly as possible. And luckily we had buy-in from leadership. Once we, especially because we came with the data, we did our homework, and that was the biggest part. We did our homework, we interviewed, we surveyed, we had meetings with folks, we traveled to the plants, and we built relationships with even, you know, line leads, just entry level or even just plant level leadership, right? These are folks who are just kind of crew leads, but we listened to them and we took in their information, and it was very powerful and impactful. And so with that data, we were able to tell a story. And
I think Adele, like a lot of, from what I've heard, I mean, you know, I'm a marketing person, so I'm not, you know, technically, I'm in the training business, but I'm a marketing person. I think one of the challenges that I've heard is exactly what you're saying, which is how do you build those relationships? So you're saying you took a multifaceted approach. You're meeting in person, which, wow, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you're meeting in person, you're doing surveys, was there a formalized plan to it, or you just kind of went out?
Yeah, no, there was a formalized plan. So we sat down and we created a structure around it. And the structure kind of incorporated this that you see on the slide here, where we bucketed folks into corporate, plant-based managers and leaders, and then entry-level plant employees. And we went through, you know, what are your biggest pain points? What are your biggest needs? Where are your gaps? Like you need people to be from A to B, but it's not happening. So what does that look like? And then, and what are your obstacles right now? And some of it was like event session. And I know we all want to avoid those event sessions, but they were actually really valuable. There was some value to just letting people release what they needed to say and how frustrating this was. And we'll go into why they were frustrated. And the nice thing was we did start to find solutions around this. And so for our corporate employees, they're pretty high level. They had all the technological access they needed. They had email, they had desktop computers. They were able to get into the LMS very easily. They were able to get that upskilling that they needed. And we did that by, one, we had an HRIS system, and we had an LMS that were tied into each other. So the HRIS system we bought also came with an LMS. And I think that was what made the sale originally, was like, oh, we can just bundle it all together. It's amazing. look, it ties easily into our HR data, which yes, that is a win. The downfall was they didn't do their due diligence in our predecessors in how were our plant-based employees going to access that? Were they going to access that? What are our needs there? Like, yes, it works wonderful for corporate. How easy is it to use for our managers on the plants, right? Like, we have these plant managers who need to assign training and need to deliver training and need to track training and need to report on training. Is it easy for them to use? And the answer was no. And so that was really difficult. And then to top that off, we needed to create content in-house every once in a while. So they bought an expensive, content authoring tool that was not a part of the LMS, which is fine. That's very typical. But if we could go back in time, we probably would have done that a little bit different. And then thirdly, they bought a very, very expensive off-the-shelf content from your basic catalog or library, very typical. But again, it wasn't fully thought out. Like, we bought it for corporate. We weren't going to give it to entry-level plant employees. And then as my boss and I are starting to find out more data, we're getting a story that's building and building and building. And we're hearing one of the things that these plant-based managers and these entry-level plant individuals want is access to this LMS and access to the upskilling. And if you were an entry-level plant employee, you weren't getting that. And so we had to dive deep. We did. We knew there were some issues, and we knew we had to kind of look at this from a really open perspective. I think we kind of originally people thought, okay, let's just put some band-aids on things. It's a nice package because it comes with the whole HRIS suite, but there wasn't as much thought into the long term, into what would really be needed long term. And that's when we started to face issues, because we came in a year or two deep into the situation, and that's when the problems really started to arise. So like it says here, yeah.
Adele, let me ask you a question about upskilling, because I know this is a hot topic. And do you think that there's nervousness around upskilling, where if you're a manager and you think, well, I don't necessarily want my people to do this training because then I might lose them. They're going to elevate out. And I think it's something that maybe managers are not sure that they want to encourage it, which sounds, it's a little depressing, but is there a nervousness around upskilling?
I have seen that, but mostly I've actually seen people really wanting to support one another is what I've personally seen. And it was very nice to see, especially in this organization specifically. I mean, I have never seen bigger hearts than in this particular organization. And that ran from my VP to my boss all the way down to entry level, like these folks that I met across the country. They really just wanted skills, and they wanted to do better, and they wanted to feel meaningful and valuable. And they consistently wanted to put in their numbers and keep people on board. That was the other thing. Because of the way that we had lined out training, onboarding was a bit painful. It was hard to keep people on and get them to stay. And I think my boss and I both definitely felt strongly that it was because of the way we were onboarding, right? We were treating orientation like a full-blown onboarding in an ILT session. And that's not onboarding in a manufacturing plant, right? Yeah. You have to like build skills and have physical learning happen. And so, corporate employees, we purchased the standalone subscription. We didn't purchase the mobile functionality to the LMS. And we did not give entry-level employees email addresses, which was a big push my boss and I had. We did give them user IDs. So they technically had accounts, but they didn't have any access to technology really. And so they couldn't log in. And then...
Now, why would you have not done mobile? I'm assuming there are people like on a factory floor or something.
We're not sure. It was just a decision that was made before we came on, and it was pretty painful. It was pretty painful to retro, and we couldn't, for whatever reason, I think because eventually we decided we need to go with another LMS because the LMS was so challenging to use. And that's what I wanted to get into next. Like, we kind of got corporate employees were off and running. They were set. They had everything they needed. But we kind of like didn't do our due diligence in the meat and potatoes of the organization, which is these factory employees who are making all of our product, which we're selling to make money. And so our plant-based managers, they needed, what did they need? They really needed ease of use and access to reporting, huge, especially for stuff like OSHA and ISO, but also just to see how people were doing and what trainings they had been through. And that cross-training piece, right? We needed to have a way to track and manage who had been cross-trained, where they had been cross-trained, and when they had been cross-trained, and then evaluating them on that cross-training. And so we were doing all of that at the time, pen and paper in filing cabinets. And so again, it was, but they needed to be, we needed to teach them how to fish. And we started to try and teach them how to fish. And time after time after time, we hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, not because the managers couldn't do it, not because they weren't smart enough, but it was because the tool, the LMS itself, was so hard to use. We even had a third-party contractor who would help us use it, and they sometimes couldn't even help us. They were like, and these were the experts, right? I've used multiple LMSs. There's a reason why I work for Litmos. I love Litmos. I can't say enough about it when it comes to the UI. I know that if I had a manager that needed to run reports, do cross-training, make that happen, I could easily train the trainer in a tool like Litmos, right? We couldn't do that here.
That's back to the stat from the beginning. That's back to that 48% of, mass population of almost everyone. 48% are in that boat where they're saying, yeah, we have a tool, technically, I mean, pun intended, technically, but it's not working for us.
Right.
That
was us. That was totally us.
Yeah, but no one but Einstein over here can work it, can use it. And you're bringing in consultants and even they're like,
right. And it worked great for like basic e-learning that you could assign across the board globally. It worked great. The rule system made sense. The logic behind that all made sense. But when we got to this like cross training, and you'll see the third little line under plant-based managers is they weren't hosting, they didn't have a need for e-learning. They had a need for kinesthetic, physical movement, muscle memory learning, right? They're building things on a plant floor. But that training needed to be tracked. If we were going to pass our ISO audits, if we were going to tell OSHA we were in compliance, we had to prove that. And our managers couldn't do that. So then that all fell onto this team of 3, which was kind of insane. And so that was one thing that was a big pain point, a really big pain point. And we realized like I think that tool that we had is great for really robust organizations when you have like a team of 5 people who are dedicated to one region at a time. We didn't have those resources. And I think a lot of folks don't have those resources. And so we needed something easy to use. It needs to be easy to access. You got to be able to train the trainer. And then you just really need to, and this slide is kind of about like, please do your homework. And if you're having a hard time getting the approval to do your homework, like try to paint a story for your leadership, paint that story for them, make it as accurate and factual based as possible, while also make it engaging, and write the business impact down, identify the business impact, because when a bunch of folks can't get reporting done and can't create the training tracking that they need or assign the training that they need, whether it's an ILT component, it's face-to-face, but you got to track it, or it's e-learning, you're going to have some pain points, and that is going to create a business impact. And then entry-level plant employees, they just really needed an easy to use and accessible LMS. And they really yearned for more relevant hands-on training. And what I mean by that is, for example, our new hire onboarding, we kind of gave them all this e-learning in a classroom where it was on a big projector, and we just clicked through a bunch of slides, in an e-learning course with an instructor up front. That's great for foundational knowledge, but you really need to have that hands-on component. And And the LMS comes into play when you're, again, tracking and reporting. And so I just don't think that was really thought of originally. And it created a lot of pain. And ultimately, we ended up making the decision to start researching new LMSs that came with curated content. We had a subscription for the third-party content author tool, but had we been given a 3-in-1 package, I think we definitely would have taken it. And so I think the lesson learned here really is, please, I can't encourage you enough to build relationships all the way down to your entry-level employees. If that means you have to jump on a call with them, or you have to ask their manager to get them in a virtual room, that's okay. Take the time to do that and create that story. Get the story and get the true story using facts and data through surveys, interviews, questionnaires. Listen to your management. What are they going through? What's the pain that they're dealing with? And if you have the opportunity to get in front of all these things, I highly recommend it. Because if my boss and my colleague at the time, if we would have been able to go back in time, we would have tried to get in front of all of this, and we would have done our due diligence and really tuned into what are our needs, how do those needs match up with these different tools, what tool is going to do the best job for us, for everyone, not just corporate, not just managers, but everyone.
And what about when you're talking about the entry level type person? Is there, I know that some organizations that are Litmos customers, particularly in the nonprofit space, there's a level of unfamiliarity with technology at all.
Yes.
And how do you how do you train on how to do the training?
Right. And that was a huge one for us as well, right? That was what we want. That was our dream, was to kind of train the trainers. And so that comes into the tool you pick as well, right? You want to go with something that is truly easy to access and easy to use. It's intuitive, it feels natural. It's, someone can look at it and kind of start to see, okay, I see this click path, this makes sense to me. But one of the things we did is we did a blended approach there, where we did really robust process docs, and we had like a wiki type of environment. I believe we used SharePoint, and we created process docs there. And then because it was blended, introduction. So we had pre-communication, like this is our plan. We communicated. This is coming down the pipeline. Very clear expectations. I cannot stress enough how important it is to communicate clear expectations. And it is our job as learning leaders to figure out those expectations via a needs and a gap assessment and a target audience analysis. Like, who are these people? What do they need? What's the gap? And you make expectations based around that and your learning objectives. And once you've communicated that, then you roll out the actual enablement or the training, right? So blended learning key.
It's the start at the stop philosophy, like start at the end and work back.
Exactly. I've done
it's not
12 years now.
You say, what do we want? What's the ultimate outcome? So I'm going to start there. I guess it's like a geometry problem, right? And then you're going to build the proof backwards.
Absolutely. Yes. I call it reverse engineering for my goals and objectives. I don't know how many times I've said that. Probably too many, but it's very helpful. And then we did e-learning face-to-face. We usually rolled out with the initial face-to-face. And then we had an e-learning option, so that, on demand type. So as you need it, you can jump into the LMS and grab it. And then process documentation. And we did play the role of, if you need support, you can contact us and we'll game plan it from there. But most of the time, that was enough for our managers to take it and run with it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm watching some of the chats pop up, and folks, we're going to address, I know there's some questions that have come in, as well as some comments. And one of the themes that I'm seeing, Adele, in the chat is that training people have to be salespeople.
Yes, you do.
Salespeople, because you've got to sell it. Like, if you don't have all of your audiences, your various constituents involved and feeling, as we were saying in the very beginning, feeling like there is value
Yes.
in doing it, they're not going to be on board.
Absolutely.
You have to sell it. You have to put your sales hat on.
You got to partner, you have to sell, and you got to bring the facts, right? Tell a
Yep.
story using facts. It's so important. It's really key.
So on this, I mean, you've been talking about this first box here on the left, the whole
Right.
time, which is, this is your sales hat. I mean, I don't know if you want to go further on that, but I mean, you really have to get good at selling what you do and being able to articulate the value.
Yeah. And again, my biggest, what I've learned over the 13 years or whatever is I've learned that from my mentors. It wasn't like obviously not a brilliant idea I came up with. Grateful to those mentors. It's just, I can't say it enough. Tell the story, and you're going to tell the story best by going straight to the horse's mouth. Like, don't ignore your entry level employees. They're human too. They go through pains too. They have needs, and we're really just doing the whole org a disservice if we ignore any part of the org. So go get those stories and then tell your leadership what's really happening, because they're so busy. They just might not even have they've got other things going on. They might not have that awareness. A lot of times they do. They just don't have the time to go collect the data. And so they're grateful to you with bringing them the facts.
Yeah. And then in this middle box here on this slide is, this is what we were getting at about our Litmos 3 C's, which is create, curate, connect. And it sounds like from what you're saying, from your experience, that what has changed in recent years is that now you don't need to go get your third-party content authoring. You can have a solution that works for you with everything, and that those are the essentials now. Is that make it easier for yourself, or what you're saying about your awful unwieldy LMS that you were using before. I don't know who it is. You don't even need to tell me, but if the essentials now is that the technology is really good.
It is really good.
And it's available, and so get it, and then fall out of that 48% that wants something different. And I think those are kind of the new essentials, is like use the best technology you can get your hands on that works for your business. And we're not going to be salesy, but of course we happen to be a little bit biased in this category.
Well, and there was a reason coming to Litmos was kind of a dream come true, because I've been in the learning industry for a while now, and it's like, I want to go be a part of a learning org, right? And not only are they a learning org, but I mean, I couldn't be happier having everything in one location. Like, I can build my training, I can curate my training, and I can assign my training and track my training all in one place. I mean, it's kind of heavenly.
Yeah. And then some of those services that you're talking about too, when you were bringing in like an LMS admin consultant, just as a plug point for Litmos is, you can come to us and we'll help you.
Yeah.
If you're working in an organization,
kind of amazing. Yeah.
Says, hey, you need the professional services. Okay, we can do that too.
Yeah.
So not to go down.
We didn't have that. It was really, we kind of yelled into the void sometimes, and that was really painful. And I know a lot of admins kind of deal with that, and that's it's not fun.
So that's part of like connecting to the support that you need if you need it. Maybe you don't, maybe you don't. Maybe you run the thing by yourself. But and then I know I'm keeping my eye on the clock here. Just a couple more minutes, but I don't know. Do you think there are particular, as far as this box, particular capabilities that really have the most direct effect on performance? I think this is kind of a difficult question in our own slides. That's
okay though. The answer is yeah. So, do you have a heavy need for simulation and demonstration, right? So that was one of the things the manufacturing company really needed. We needed people to be able to not sit in classrooms and watch slides on a screen at the plants. We needed them to get their hands dirty and have someone help them through what each step of this manufacturing line included so that they could succeed. the issue was we weren't really giving them that. We were unfortunately kind of putting them on the line and having them learn as they go. But the truth is, they needed a safe place. They needed a safe space to demonstrate and simulate what it was like to be on the line before we took them out there. And, you know, we talked about at the manufacturing company, virtual reality was one of those options, which is pretty big in the manufacturing world. Video assessments was another really big option that we discussed to have some for evaluation purposes too. So, and we do have that capability. So just thinking about, you know, a lot of times we think about, you know, I think there's a difference kind of about like education and actual like learning of skills, right? Like we can look at slides and we can cognitively be introduced to educational pieces, but when we need to start using skills and applying skills, then we start getting into like actual demonstration, simulation, role playing. Those sort of things are where we can safely, in a safe environment, apply the skills. And that's where we see the biggest results, is when people have a safe space to apply skills. And an LMS, if you have the right LMS, you can do that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm going to jump to some questions because I know we've got to keep our eye on time here, and we probably have just a few more minutes. So here's a good question from Melody. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Okay. Given that your situation is common, what would you do / ask to your stakeholders if you came in an organization in flux like this global manufacturer? That was unclear to me. In other words, how do you make the best of a bad situation?
Yeah, that's, well, you, while you're doing your homework and thinking about your next move, which is what we were doing, like we knew we wanted to get out of this really challenging technical LMS. While we were doing that, we had to create rapid implementations to help folks in the now. And I know that's really general, but one of the things we did is we did get down into the nitty gritty and we started dealing with processes, and we started encouraging managers to get into these safe training spaces. No, yes, we were going to have a hard time tracking it, right? We knew that. We already knew that. It was painful. We were going to have a hard time doing it, but we knew that we needed these skill sets to be accomplished. And so we had kind of we had two agendas at the same time. One was the future solution and making that better, and really encompassing like what our global needs were and what the likelihood was going to be in, you know, a year and a half, 2 years. Like how long was it really going to take us to get off of that LMS, to get into something better that we can really train the trainers with? But what are we going to do right now? And so we did have to have multiple agendas running at the same time, which isn't easy, but we did pull it off. And again, that was through building relationships and really digging into what the needs were with our managers.
Well, and so I'm going to say to everybody who's chatted in and sent additional questions that we are not going to be able to get to, because Adele, we're being given, we're given the warning. We're being given the hook. We need to wrap up, but I will say to everyone who we have not been able to respond to, first of all, thank you. And second of all, we will get the chat notes and we'll follow up with you directly. So
thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, and then I think, do we have, just a contact slide? I think our last one maybe has our, because some people are asking who they can contact at Litmos. We will follow up with you, Alice and others. And then of course, here's all of our social sites. Send us a note, jump on, join us on LinkedIn or what have you. So with that, we are being told we have to wrap up. So, and yes, the slides are going to be distributed. For those of you who are asking, that will be sent from Training Industry. And that's a wrap. And Adele, thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Oh, it was a pleasure. I'm such a nerd. I could talk about this all day.
I know we could both, and then, but D is making us wrap up. So
I'm so sorry. The time goes by so quickly.
It goes by so fast. So thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Just a reminder to everyone, we're going to take about a 10-minute break. I will be ending this session, and up next we have Joel Noronha joining us from WhatFix for the session, How to Build High-Performing Teams with Successful Digital Transformation. So as I said, I'll be ending this session, go back to the event lobby, and you can join us in the next one at the top of the hour.
Thanks from
Thank you
all.
so much, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.